Well, ethanol production rebounded 5% last week, with inputs reaching the highest level since prior to the pandemic. The trade is expected to continue as consumption grows over the next few months. Well, President and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association, Geoff Cooper, joins us now with the latest insight on the industry. And Geoff, as always, thanks for your time this morning. So what are the highlights from yesterday's ethanol report?
Well, thanks for having me this morning, Janet. And you're right, we did see some really good numbers come out from the Energy Information Administration yesterday. And I would just remind folks that it was at this time 1 year ago when we really saw U.S. fuel consumption just completely collapse due to COVID. We saw gasoline demand cut in half in just a few short weeks last April. And, of course, that meant ethanol demand was cut in half as well. So we've spent the last year really trying to claw our way back to pre-pandemic levels of demand. We haven't really gotten there yet, but here in the last few weeks, we've had some very positive indications. We've seen stronger fuel demand numbers, and we are almost back to where we were before COVID. So obviously that bodes very well for ethanol demand. U.S. gasoline consumption last week was just 2% below the same level, or below where it was the same week in 2019. So, pre-COVID, we're getting back to those levels. We saw more ethanol blended into gasoline last week than we've seen in over a year, 882,000 barrels per day on average, and we haven't been that high since the second week of March last year, just before that collapse. So things are definitely moving in the right direction. We're seeing some bullishness and optimism returning to the marketplace, and that's great news for ethanol producers and also for the corn farmers that supply our industry.
So, Geoff, as vaccinations expand and parts of the economy begin to reopen, what trends do you think we can maybe expect to see for ethanol consumption going forward?
Well, yeah, and we're tracking that very closely. About half of the U.S. adult population now has at least one dose of the vaccine. About a quarter of the adult population is fully vaccinated, and we think that is allowing more people to feel comfortable getting back out on the road and doing some traveling. I think people are anxious to get out of the house. There's a bit of spring fever, and people are wanting to get back on the roads. We're talking to several analysts that are expecting a very robust summer travel season, lots of summer vacations, and sort of back to the way things were prior to COVID. So we're expecting to see sort of pre-COVID, more normal rates of gasoline and ethanol consumption this summer, and hopefully a return, more permanent return to normal supply-demand conditions in the ethanol marketplace. So, the economics remain a bit challenging in the industry. We were certainly hoping to see a few more corn acres. In yesterday's prospective plantings report, we are dealing with higher corn prices. We've been able to manage that okay. But overall, the outlook for the industry is positive and looking good heading into the summer.
Geoff, before we wrap things up, have you had the chance to communicate much with some of the processing facilities across the country? What kind of is their temperament right now? We've had a change of administration. We've had a lot of things impact them over the last year. And as you say, we're getting kind of geared back up. What is the mood out there?
Well, we're sensing a very positive mood in the industry. Again, the supply-demand conditions are greatly improved from where they were a year ago, and we've seen steady progress there. And then politically and around the regulatory and policy front, cautiously optimistic about what we've seen out of the new administration so far, especially around the renewable fuel standard and the Biden administration's commitment to enforce that program more faithfully than the previous administration.
All right. Well, Geoff, as always, thank you very much for your time here this morning. President and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association, Geoff Cooper, connecting with us today from St. Louis. You can go online to ethanolrfa.org for additional information.